Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Group Director of Content and Editorial, Industrial and Tech at Emerald. So happy to be joined by Cindy Davis from AVTechnology and Ryan Willden from Inogeni here at the HDBaseT booth at ISE 2026. We're going to be talking about video conferencing trends, video conferencing needs from two people who know the market better than pretty much anybody. So thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan, for having us. Yeah.
So let's get started talking about the pandemic. I know it's not something anyone wants to go back to, but that was a real catalyst in the video conferencing industry because, of course, there was a lot of adaptive expenditure as people made sure their conference rooms, boardrooms, personal setups, for that matter, were up to snuff when everyone had to work remotely or in a hybrid fashion. Thankfully, that's all in the rear view now. So I want to know, what is the catalyst? What is the engine pulling the market forward now for video conferencing? If it's not the pandemic adaptive expenditure, what is the engine moving the market now?
I think I've got a pretty good grasp on that. I think one of the things that we learned during the pandemic is that people wanted conference rooms simple. Conference rooms prior to the pandemic existed. Oftentimes they were complicated and challenging to use. And I think, when the pandemic rolled around, we realized that we wanted communication to be simpler and we wanted the technology to be simpler. So I think that's going to be continue to be a catalyst moving forward. You're starting to see a lot of manufacturers that develop solutions that are all-in-one solutions. And a lot of those all-in-one solutions are really great solutions, but oftentimes some of those have gaps, and there's ways for manufacturers to come in and help provide solutions that really complete those systems, make those easier. But I think that's going to continue to evolve as we've noticed with the pandemic. Some corporations and companies are still trying to determine what that return to office or return to work, return to the office strategy looks like, and I think that's going to continue to evolve. So I would say, just the simplification of technology and making sure that we're providing for ways to connect, whether it's at home or at work.
So I would agree, and we are 5 years out of the pandemic, thank God. But all the research that I'm reading, there's still a good anywhere between 75 and up to 98% of workers that still are remote or hybrid, I should say, and I think there's that's a pretty high percentage. So even if you have one person that's remote, you absolutely have to have that quality experience. And I would say, on another point, even if everybody's in the office today with AI and agentic AI, having everybody in a room and you're still recording that experience is really important. And it's got to be very high quality audio and video. And it absolutely has to be easy for somebody to say, okay, we want to record this experience. So that has to be very easy, very high quality.
Agreed.
So I want to go right into what you were saying, Cindy. Very easy, very high quality audio, video. My next question is about, in a granular way, the features, the benefits that vendors are leading with to make sure that they are meeting the needs of the market today for video conferencing. What are you hearing on the end user side? What are you seeing on the vendor side as far as what the trends are, what the needs are, and how are people responding in turn to make sure that the products are not meeting yesterday's needs, but are meeting today's and tomorrow's? And whoever wants to start with that.
That's Cindy.
So on the end user side, we're still hearing a lot of BYOD. As much as IT departments would love to have one standard, especially with folks that are still remote or they will be remote. You want that same experience, a similar experience that you have at home, and bring it into the office. So BYOD is very important. And it's got to be easy. So that infrastructure, having that HDBaseT infrastructure makes it easy and really can help ensure that quality experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think people are used to devices and they want to use devices that they have an intimate connection with. And so whether it's our personal handheld devices, the laptops that we use on a day-to-day basis, we're familiar with those devices and we ultimately want to use those. People are sometimes intimidated by the technology in conference rooms and a touch panel. They're afraid to go up and push buttons. And I think the ability for people to be able to bring their own technology that they use at home and they're comfortable with really makes a big difference. And so being able to support technologies like USB-C, I think that's really critical. As USB-C becomes kind of more the standard in the industry, I was talking with someone the other day that mentioned a few years ago how there were more HDMI connections and maybe a single USB-C connection. It's flipped. And now we're seeing that most customers want USB-C connectivity and multiple connections and maybe just a couple of connections for that legacy device to connect. So I think that's really important, being able to provide the connectivity that users are used to. We all have USB-C on our phones for charging and connecting those. People are familiar with that. So engaging with really the end user and being as a manufacturer, providing solutions that really make the user feel comfortable using the technology, I think continues to expand that technology and the adoption of that.
So I want to go exactly to that point, user comfort, because that leads into my thoughts about meeting equity. That may be a tired term in some cases. We've been talking about it for a while, but nevertheless, it is still very important. As you said, Cindy, there are still lots of people working remotely or working in a hybrid manner. They cannot feel like second-class citizens in meetings. They can't struggle to be heard or struggle to be seen. I'm interested in knowing what the vendor community is doing, what you're seeing on the end user side to help facilitate genuine meeting equity, whether it's eye contact, whether it's directional sound, whether it's visibility when you speak. What are we doing to facilitate equitable meetings for that very large percentage who are not reporting to a physical office every day?
So I think, one thing that I wanted to mention that's an interesting trend too is now, of course, we used to have one or two meeting rooms that would have these setups. Now it's almost every meeting space. So what I have found interesting is that they're not only remote from their home, but you can have three different office spaces within one office building, and they're still going to remote in to one meeting space. So that meeting space, they could be from all over, and that meeting equity, it's all about that high quality audio and video and ensuring that and ensuring the connectivity. Latency is really important now, making sure that I'm hearing you correctly and your facial expressions, and that all really matters now, where when we used to be meetings over phone, it didn't matter as much. But now that eye contact matters, that latency matters. So I think the visual matters with meeting equity.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think one critical thing that we really all crave is human connection. And when you're on a conference call and you see the far end and they're in a room full of people and you don't really get to see their individual facial expressions, you don't get to see the emotion behind what they're saying, it can kind of be disconnecting a little bit and you almost disengage. Same thing for when you're on a call with people that are working from home and they turn off their cameras. You disengage with those people. So I think meeting equity really is, even though it's a buzzword, I think it's really critical that we support that. As a manufacturer, we're constantly looking for ways that we can improve that concept and improve on that capability. You mentioned, Cindy, that some of those rooms there are places that have very few of those rooms. What I think the manufacturers need to do, and one thing that we're striving to do, is try to make those rooms more affordable so that technology can be more widely employed. Because that tracking of people and their facial expressions and being able to zoom in and capture the emotion behind what they say is so critical. And so we've got to do better from a manufacturing side to make those systems more affordable so that you can do more of those rooms. And improving the technology. If the technology is there but it's not transparent, and if it doesn't really work as you predicted it would, then it makes you not trust the technology. So you've got to be able to trust the technology. The technology's got to be good and reliable, and that will lead to more engagement from people on the calls.
Yeah, if you're going to go into a room and you know that there's cameras and the people on the far end or the office in the next level, you've got to be able to be seen. Everybody's going to be
Right.
able to be seen. So heard and seen. And so multiple cameras in a room. I mean, that's new in the last couple of years, that there's multiple cameras in a room.
So a word you mentioned was reliability, and I do want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure underpinning reliability in these rooms. Naturally, we are at the HDBaseT Alliance booth, HDBaseT, known for uncompressed, known for bulletproof reliability. Do you want to talk a little bit about the signal distribution infrastructure in these spaces and why that is very, very critical to achieving the kind of outcomes we're talking about, where you have no degradation?
Absolutely. I think that's what's really important from that perspective is, HDBaseT allows for that the signal that we can count on. When you talk about AV over IP, things get a little bit more complicated because now you're relying on IT, you're relying on their network, you're relying on those networks to be maintained. I've gone into projects where customers have deployed an AV over IP solution, and the IT administrator decides 6 months down the road to completely redo the IT network, change the subnet, change the IP addresses, and it breaks that capability. So again, I think at the end of the day, the users need to be able to trust the technology and know that it's reliable, and HDBaseT provides that for us in our solutions. We've got several solutions for BYOD, bring your own meeting, and people need to be able to rely on the fact that if they plug in that USB-C connection or that HDMI connection, the infrastructure behind the scenes has got to work. And it's got to be high quality. They can't be worried about pixelation, images, or quality in the image. They've got to rely that it's going to be a quality signal so that they can get their message across.
And there's so many more devices now that are in these rooms. Multiple cameras, multiple microphones, all kinds of devices, and those change in and out sometimes often. So being able to the reliability of knowing, okay, I'm going to add a camera because we didn't get the coverage we wanted, or we're going to add another microphone. Being able to do that and know that you don't have to reconfigure the room.
Agreed. Yeah.
That's really
the
important.
flexibility of the technology in the rooms has got to be there, and HDBaseT allows us the ability to extend that technology, whether it's putting a camera in a remote location for a better angle and a better shot of the participants of that room, or allowing us to extend our laptops. That technology is super critical, and HDBaseT makes a great product that we know that we can rely on in those spaces.
Well, Ryan, Cindy, thank you so much. I feel like I have a much better grasp on the current state of the video conferencing market, where it's going, what the needs are. Thanks entirely to you both. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Cindy.
My name is Dan Ferrisi, Group Director, Content and Editorial, Industrial and Tech at Emerald, here at the HDBaseT Alliance booth, where we are celebrating 15 years of HDBaseT.